August 19, 1944. Wehrmacht Headquarters, East Prussia. Inside the nerve center of the German war machine, General Oberst Alfred Jodl, one of Hitler's most senior military advisors, reviewed the latest intelligence from the collapsing Western Front. The maps were grim, showing Allied armies surging across France at a speed that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. But among the alarming reports, Jodl and his staff saw a fatal flaw, a simple, mathematical certainty that promised a German victory. His staff had calculated the distance from the Normandy beaches to the tip of General Patton's spearheading Third Army, over 400 miles. Based on decades of military experience, they knew what this meant. No army in history could sustain such an advance. The conclusion was inescapable, a fact as solid as the laws of gravity. The Americans have outrun their logistics, Jodl declared. Patton will halt within days, perhaps hours. From their perspective, it wasn't a guess. It was a professional diagnosis. The American war machine, for all its power, was about to run out of fuel. This wasn't wishful thinking. It was a cold, hard calculation based on the brutal arithmetic of mechanized warfare, a subject the Germans knew intimately. Every German general understood from bitter experience the tyranny of supply lines. Their own intelligence meticulously tracked American consumption rates. A single advancing armored division burned through an astonishing 150,000 gallons of fuel every day. Each infantry division required another 700 tons of supplies daily. Patton commanded 12 divisions. The mathematics was irrefutable. This was the exact nightmare they had faced in Russia, where their own blitzkrieg had bled out across the vast steppes, starved of fuel and ammunition. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, a veteran of that front, summarized the German position perfectly. The Americans faced the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a disadvantage. History teaches us what comes next. Paralysis. For the German High Command, the American spearhead wasn't a threat, it was a ghost of their own past failures, and they were simply waiting for it to collapse. But the Germans were right. The American advance was on the verge of collapse. On August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau, a room full of skeptical officers from the Motor Transport Service stared at the brutal math. Traditional supply methods, railways, scheduled convoys, depot-to-depot distribution, had completely buckled under the strain of Patton's unprecedented speed. Then, a lieutenant colonel named Laurent Ayres stood up and proposed a solution so radical, so contrary to every rule of military science, that it bordered on insanity. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we're going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle will run 20 hours out of 24. No stopping except for gas and emergencies." The name came from railway terminology. A red ball freight was an express shipment that took priority over everything else. The technical specifications were a staff officer's nightmare. 2 parallel, one-way highways. Convoys departing every 5 minutes, maintaining 35 miles per hour. And most shocking of all, 24-hour operations with headlights blazing, completely abandoning the blackout discipline that had been hammered into every soldier since D-Day. It was a flagrant invitation for an attack. It was a logistical Hail Mary, an operation that, by every textbook ever written, was utterly impossible. For a plan this audacious to work, it required a machine that was simple, rugged, and available in almost unbelievable numbers. That machine was the GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, the unglamorous, 6-wheeled workhorse of the Allied armies, affectionately nicknamed the Deuce and a Half. It wasn't a technological marvel, but it was the perfect tool for the job, tough, reliable, and easy to fix, and America had built an army of them. By the end of the war, General Motors had produced over 500,000 of these vehicles. To put that number in perspective, the United States had manufactured more of this single truck model than the entire German military possessed of all types combined. This staggering fact revealed the fundamental difference between the two war machines. Where German industry often focused on complex, high-performance weapons, American industry embraced mass production. It was a philosophy of overwhelming the enemy not just with bullets and bombs, but with an endless supply of simple, dependable machines. This unstoppable fleet of trucks was about to become the lifeblood of Patton's advance. But machines, no matter how numerous, need men to drive them. And the men who formed the backbone of the Red Ball Express represented one of the greatest ironies of the Second World War. Of the 23,000 drivers who would ultimately run this impossible route, an astonishing 75% were African American soldiers. They were fighting for a nation that preached freedom, yet they served in a still segregated army where they were often treated as second-class citizens. These were men who, in much of America, couldn't eat in the same restaurants or drink from the same fountains as the white soldiers whose lives depended on the supplies they carried. This profound injustice gave their mission a dual purpose. They weren't just fighting to defeat Germany. They were fighting to defeat the vile racial ideology that Nazism represented. They knew what Hitler thought of them, which made them drive even harder. Every rumbling engine, every ton of ammunition delivered to Patton's guns, was a direct, thunderous refutation of the myth of Aryan superiority. They were fighting a war on two fronts, one against German panzers and the other against the prejudice that followed them even onto the battlefield. They were fighting racism with truck keys, determined to prove their worth through unstoppable performance. Within 48 hours, the impossible was operational. By August 28, German reconnaissance units hidden along the main French highways began reporting something that defied all military logic. Peering through the darkness, they didn't see the expected scattered, blacked-out convoys moving under the cover of night. Instead, they saw an endless, blazing river of light snaking its way eastward. A frantic radio message from Aufklärungsgruppe 116 captured the sheer disbelief. Continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline, estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. This wasn't just a breach of protocol. It was a flagrant violation of every fundamental rule of warfare they had ever been taught. Headlights at night were a magnet for air attacks. Bumper-to-bumper columns were a perfect artillery target. It was reckless, it was arrogant, and it should have been suicidal. Yet the Americans seemed completely unconcerned, as if the threat of the Luftwaffe and the Wehrmacht simply didn't exist. For the German soldiers watching from the shadows, this wasn't a supply line. It was a spectacle of madness. The strange reports of these ghost convoys shot up the chain of command, quickly reaching the ears of senior commanders who couldn't believe what they were reading. On August 30th, General Edgar Feuchtinger, commander of the 21st Panzer Division, went to see the phenomenon for himself. From a concealed position, he personally witnessed the impossible river of American supplies. His subsequent report to Army Group B headquarters was not one of tactical analysis, but of pure, unadulterated shock. He wrote, "The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause." The relentless, mechanical tempo stunned him. He concluded with a chilling realization that marked a turning point in German thinking. "They don't hide, don't disperse, don't follow any rules we understand. It's not military science," he wrote. "It's mass production applied to warfare." The initial confidence of the German high command was beginning to crack, replaced by the dawning, horrifying understanding that they weren't just fighting an army, but an entire industrial civilization on wheels. What the Germans struggled to comprehend in principle, the Americans were achieving in brutal, quantitative fact. The numbers generated by the Red Ball Express in its very first week of operation were so extreme they defied all European precedent. Let's look at the data. From August 25th to the 31st, the Express delivered a staggering 89,939 tons of supplies. That is a daily average of 12,848 tons, more than Patton's entire army was projected to consume. The trucks themselves were being driven into the ground, with the average round trip covering 686 miles. And in the ultimate display of industrial might, the operation was so vast that its own fleet of trucks consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline every single day, just to deliver supplies to the front. When German logistics specialists later captured American documents containing these figures, their reaction was one of pure denial. They officially dismissed the numbers as blatant, impossible propaganda. The German experts simply could not accept that these figures were real. But the numbers were real, and as the Wehrmacht would soon learn, they were only just getting started. An operation this intense, running thousands of trucks 20 hours a day, inevitably led to an astronomical rate of mechanical failure. At its peak, approximately 1,800 trucks were breaking down every single day. So how did the Americans prevent the route from becoming a 400-mile-long junkyard? The solution was a brutal, unsentimental system that flew in the face of traditional military conservation. Mobile maintenance units roamed the highway, performing repairs directly on the roadside. These mechanics operated under a ruthless triage system. They had just 15 minutes to either get a truck running or push it into the nearest ditch. There were no tow trucks, no lengthy repairs. The priority was keeping the artery clear at all costs. Parts were simply cannibalized from vehicles deemed unrepairable. This was a philosophy born of industrial excess, where German doctrine emphasized meticulous repair and the conservation of every machine. The Americans treated their trucks as disposable. For them, a broken-down vehicle wasn't a valuable asset to be saved. It was a roadblock. Solving the problem of breakdowns was one thing, but it was dwarfed by the colossal challenge of fuel. With the Red Ball Express itself burning through 300,000 gallons daily, on top of the insatiable thirst of Patton's armies, a conventional supply chain was impossible. The American solution was another logistical marvel, one so audacious that German intelligence hadn't even detected it: Operation Pluto, which stood for pipelines under the ocean. In a staggering feat of engineering, the Allies had laid flexible pipelines across the English Channel, pumping a ceaseless river of fuel directly into France from Britain. This fed a network of forward fuel dumps and tanker trucks that ensured no Red Ball driver ever had to wait. When German reconnaissance photographs revealed American fuel depots larger than their own nation's entire strategic reserves, the shock was profound. As one German general observed in horror, "They burn more moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't war as we understand it. It's industrial overflow." This river of supplies had a direct and devastating effect on the battlefield, transforming the speed of mechanized warfare itself. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division demonstrated the terrifying new reality. In the morning, its tanks and vehicles advanced an incredible 35 miles, halting at noon not due to German resistance, but for a planned resupply. There, as if by magic, convoys of Red Ball Express trucks were already waiting with fuel and ammunition. After refueling and rearming in a matter of hours, the division charged forward again, advancing another 32 miles that same afternoon. That was a total of 67 miles in a single day. This shattered German defensive planning, which was built on the hard-won assumption that even under optimal conditions, an armored division could advance a maximum of 30 miles per day. The Americans were moving more than twice as fast as the Germans' worst-case scenario allowed for. The Red Ball Express wasn't just supplying the advance. It was fueling it, turning Patton's army into a weapon that moved faster than the Germans could even think. The reports of impossible advances and incomprehensible logistics flowed back to the highest levels of the Wehrmacht, landing on the desk of Field Marshal Walter Model, Hitler's master of defense. Reviewing the compiled intelligence on the Red Ball Express, he saw not a breakdown in military discipline, but a complete upending of the rules of war. His response revealed the profound psychological collapse that was now rippling through the German high command. It was a moment of terrifying clarity. "If these reports are accurate," Model stated, "we face not a superior army but a superior civilization." He continued, grasping the philosophical difference that underpinned the American war machine. "They waste resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics." This was the intellectual climax of the campaign. It was a verbal concession of defeat, not to Patton's generalship, or the quality of American soldiers, but to the system that supplied them. The German leadership now understood they were not fighting an army. They were fighting Detroit, and there was no military doctrine in the world that could stop an assembly line. But this victory of production was not powered by machines alone. It was paid for with a brutal human price that the German observers couldn't see. The men behind the wheel were pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. Drivers often operated for 72 straight hours, relying on benzodrine tablets to stay awake and hallucinating from sheer exhaustion. The pressure to keep the convoys moving at speed on damaged, narrow roads was relentless and deadly. In the fog and the rain, trucks collided, overturned, and burned when their overheated engines ignited. During the 82 days of the operation, this unforgiving pace claimed the lives of 300 drivers and accidents. The Red Ball Express was a logistical miracle, but it was a miracle purchased with the grit, and, all too often, the lives of the men who refused to stop rolling. While the German high command grappled with the strategic implications, the common German soldier was fighting a much more personal, psychological battle. For the men in the foxholes, the Red Ball Express wasn't a series of statistics. It was a sound. All night, every night, they could hear the low, endless rumble of motors in the distance, a constant, grinding reminder of the enemy's limitless resources. The sound itself became a form of psychological warfare. How could you maintain morale when you were rationed to just a few rounds per rifle, while listening to the sound of millions of rounds being delivered to the enemy? The sound became so demoralizing that it created ghost convoys in the minds of exhausted troops. American psychological warfare units quickly recognized this and took it a step further. They began setting up powerful speakers to blast the recorded sound of truck engines toward German lines when no actual convoys were present. The psychological damage was so profound that German units would report these phantom convoys as real, a testament to a supply line so overwhelming, its very sound could defeat an army.